much. Maybe we can share it.
We're live.
We're live. I'd like to bring this workshop to order. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councillor Robichaud.
Here.
Councillor LaRochelle.
Here.
Councillor Lunt.
Here.
Councillor Moore.
Present.
Councillor Fellows.
He is absent and excused.
Councillor Smith.
Here.
Councillor Miller.
Here.
And keep on going.
And
The board? Check me off.
Heather Ward.
She is
Jesse
absent.
Zach. Noli Lopez. Curtis Lunt.
Here.
Dan Lehman.
Here.
Right?
And I will just kind of express something that Lisa and Twyla were last meeting. We got the microphones are set up a little differently, and we did get some responses last that some people could not hear us as well. It all depends what the device they were actually listening on. So if we are speaking tonight, just try to be as close to a microphone as we can so we can actually make sure everybody that's paying attention outside of this room can actually listen. Thank you. So the first item on our budget workshop is going to be the town clerk. You going to present right from that end?
I've already got my own microphone.
There you go.
So I'll start with the capital improvement plan restoration project. And this will be fiscal year July 1 to June 30, 22 to 23. First, phase 1 has just been finished. Phase 1 were 3 volumes. Volumes 15, 16, and 17 were restored. And that finished phase 1, including a scan and film of all those documents. So our new budget will include preservation pricing for phase 2 for the restoration project. It'll include volumes 18, 19, and 20, which are all vital records, which include births, deaths, and marriages. It'll also include 2 very old volumes. The Selectmen records are 125 years old, and then the second Selectmen records book is 120 years old. Those 2 books will move us forward to the more recent books. We started with restoration of some more recent books. So that'll be phase 2, those 5 volumes. And then just for look forward at phase 3, that'll be the next budget year. But that will finish the Clerk's Records series, and it will start the records of marks, divisions, and fences. It's not on there yet. And that's a really neat one because it's one of the only volumes that tells who owned some property and some things like the notches in cows' ears so that they could be identified for the owners and things like that. So those are really exciting records to be restoring. We'll also restore Overseers of the Poor and mortgage records. And mortgage records are really interesting because New England has some of the oldest mortgage records because that's where the nation started. But there are no other mortgage records available. So these are original mortgage records. So they're not held by anyone else. So it's important that we preserve those. So that'll be phase 3 next year. But the conservation total for phase 2, which will be 22 to 23, will be $14,127. So, any questions about the restoration project? Okay. Did I skip? Nope, I didn't. So next, just looking at our budget total, last year we were at $170,044. Projected for this year, $180,601. That's a $10,557 increase. So just to give you an overview of that, First, it's important to remember the mission of the town clerk's office. It's to efficiently and accurately maintain all the town records, conduct state and local elections in accordance with state law and local charter, to issue licenses, vital records, dog licensing, and provide information to the public and local officials in a sociable and pleasant manner. So that's our mission. The town clerk is the custodian of the town seal, and we keep record of all the ordinances and other records required by state statute. As Freedom of Access officer, we maintain copies of the Freedom of Access training certificates and oaths. We're the ones who remind you that you have to renew. And we also obtain and maintain certificates of births, marriages, and deaths, what we refer to as vital records. We attest and report on vital statistics as required by state law. And we collect information and produce the annual town report for distribution before the municipal public hearing. So we also conduct and supervise all elections in accordance with state statutes. And the town clerk serves as the council secretary. So the clerk's office is responsible for taking and reproducing minutes of the council, the assessment board, review board, and the appeals board and planning board. And in addition to the clerk, we have a full-time deputy clerk and a limited part-time assistant clerk to help fill in. And those clerks may help with some of those duties as well. All right. So starting with our projected budget, the manager and non-supervisor deputy clerk, that's the town clerk and the deputy clerk. Those are at $64,272 and $38,815. For additional staff, we have temporary wages for election clerks and part-time staff. That's $8,000. It's $4,620 less than last year because last year was a presidential election. So this is a non-presidential year. Just briefly, the bulk of that $8,000 are the November and June elections. The June elections, we project at $2,950 and November at about $3,390. There's not much of a staffing difference between those two in a non-presidential year, so they're about the same cost. Any questions about that? The next section is overtime for the deputy clerk. We have that estimated at $2,600. Portions of that are for the November and June elections. And then overtime for council workshops, planning board meetings, and assessment review board meetings. So we try to keep it to a minimum, but those are what we project for the year.
Can I ask a question on that?
Mm-hmm.
And it just sticks out pretty drastically. So in last year, we actually had a little bit less budgeted at $2,300, and we actually didn't look like we expended much of it. It was actually a very low percentage. And this year, being a presidential election, this year we actually, some numbers are lower, but yet we projected that to be higher. Do you know, is there any projected idea what we will spend out of that overtime this year? Are we on pace to even come close to spending the money?
All right, so, as you know, I have been out. And so that's what this is, backup. And I believe that Lisa's covered more than maybe the amount that we projected on top of that. So, and we also gave adjustment for raises. So that would be taken into consideration as well. But I think you'll find you're going to completely expend that almost. Definitely.
So the number that actually, the $48 that actually shows in this was expended out of the $2,300 probably isn't accurate.
No, because that's as of January, right? January?
No, it's as of March 3rd.
It is, March 3rd?
Yeah.
So is it coming out of the wrong line for overtime? Because we're putting it in on the timesheet, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Just curious. I mean, it's one of those
We'll
things.
take a look at it.
When you look at
Yes.
numbers and you actually just look compared to the previous years, and if we don't expend as what we had the previous year, we always wonder why we actually bump it up. That's all.
It could
And-
be that it's all coming out of a regular line. You might have to move it.
We'd have to look at that then. Mhm.
That
Which,
makes sense.
which I know we have to plan for unexpecteds, right? We see that this year, and you never know what's going to happen, right? But we just want to make sure that we don't.
But
No.
last year she was doing workshops, 8 of them, and planning board meetings. Maybe we have a few less planning board meetings if you don't have 2 a month. That kind of fluctuates on how many they have and how many they don't have.
Well, fine. I think if we look into it, it'll be a little better. Like I say, as of, I guess, the beginning of March, we only expended $48 of it. So
Yeah, I think it's coming out of the wrong line.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
I guess we can figure that one out. Thank you.
We'll
Sorry, I didn't
straighten
mean
that
to
out.
interrupt.
No, that's
Yep.
okay. We'll look into it. So the next item is office supplies. We put that at $2,000. That's a solid number. It's the same as it was last year. The bigger ticket items on that part of the budget are we provide lunches during both the elections for the clerks, and then really the bulk of the rest of it is labels, envelopes, and paper. And we go through a lot of paper. One election, we make, I think, 5 different binders that all have lists of all the voters. And we have to do that every time to have those lists of voters. So regardless of how many people come to vote, we still have to prepare the same amount of material when it comes to that. We don't spend as much on some other things, but in this sense, in supplies, we do. We also, dog license printing, we have to do, is it two of those? So the dog licenses come to a lot too. Then next on postage and delivery, we have $1,600 budgeted. It's $200 over last year because we increased it because there was not enough last year budgeted. So we needed to just increase a little bit. The bulk of our mailing, postage and delivery is absentee ballots, and we're required to send them. And let's see, September, October, and November, and then for the June, but it's about 800 usually get mailed, so that's a lot of mailing. We also have the renewal notices for dog licenses and the online dog licenses too. So that all that creates postage needs. So
last year, the amount that we overexpended was quite high. Is that mainly because it was a presidential year for it just
ballot shipping.
ballot
ballots.
shipping, something we won't see this year, so
Yeah.
not as much, right?
Right, because we had to order in presidential over 5,000 ballots, so they're heavy.
Gotcha. Yep.
So next, we have advertising. Again, we've kept that at the same $800 that it was last year. I have a list of the different ads and how much they cost, and basically it includes the ads for hearings that we're required by law to put in, ordinances, things like that. So this is advertising that's needed for business licensing and then also for elections because we're required by law to put ads in for that too. So next are printing costs. We're estimating $2,700 for printing costs. It's less because we share ballots with the water department, the cost. We're looking at printing for annual town reports. Last year we printed 124 and we had over 20 left. So this year we're reducing it to 100, but that's still $1,200 to print those reports. Other printing includes ballots, voter cards, absentee envelopes, and then we also include in printing the binders that are engraved for council minutes, planning board minutes, and Board of Appeals. Those are all kept. So we don't have to restore them later. So they're in special binders on special paper.
Was the, may I ask a question? So the printing was really low last year also. I mean, that's a very small amount. So was the yearly reports actually paid for out of that account? I mean, on this it shows that we allowed $3,200 budgeted. We only paid out 144 of that account, which doesn't seem right. If we actually did just the annual reports would actually be quite a bit higher than that, I would assume. Right?
I think they took that out of the town manager's budget.
Okay.
Or I'm pretty sure they took it out of the town manager's budget.
Well, we haven't
We're budgeting this year in here, right?
printed the annual reports yet.
We have not printed them
Right.
yet.
No.
So
Probably
Right.
why the number's low.
Yeah.
Yep, good.
Yeah.
And then we moved it from one budget to a different
Yeah.
budget,
Nope.
or it was in this budget last year too?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're still working on that report to get it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Don't mind my questions. Anytime I see big numbers changes, that's always worth a question, right?
So next we have cell phone reimbursement. That's $420. It is the same as last year. And we have professional development is $1,800. We have several trainings. Some important ones to highlight are the elections trainings. Those are ongoing because we want to make sure that we're up to date on elections information. It also includes MMA workshops and several other things. Twyla recommended that we do all the MMA and New England Conference and New England Institute and Academy trainings. And those are probably the highest priced item. Let's see. The conference is about $300. The New England Institute and Academy is about $925 plus the deposit for it, which comes from, we separate the deposit because it's a different fiscal year, so we have it in here separately. That program is, the Institute is has a 3-year program that's 1 week each year, and then afterwards, each year the week it turns into a different sort of continuing education, as it were. But after that 3 years, that will earn me the International Certified Municipal Clerk status, which is what we want to have. And then we have additional expenses in some other lines that we'll look at. Any questions about the training? So then for meetings and dues, we have dues for the New England Association of City and Town Clerks, and then the IIMC. We have to pay dues even though we're not certified. I say we, I mean I, even though I'm not certified yet, because you're required to be a member for the certification. So
Does Lisa qualify for this, or is it not because she's part-time?
Lisa's a deputy, so she has the main is the MTCAA, the main town and city.
We have dues in there for her,
Yeah.
but not for IIMC.
Right. So we also have Maine Town and City Clerks Association dues, $30 for me and $30 for the deputy and the assistant. So all three fees for that. And then also there's a little in there for the Androscoggin, Kennebec County dues for the clerk and the deputy. So the only one that'll be just the clerk will be the international designation, which takes 3 years, but in the meantime, the other ones are the educational requirements are sort of being done at the same time.
Are you all notaries also?
That's a separate thing. I have, let's see, Lisa's a notary. I'll be a notary as soon as I finish the documentation that goes with that. It's not immediate. You have to wait. But, yes, I'll be a notary within, I don't want to say within the next few months because sometimes it's slowed down at the state level, but shortly. But in the meantime, we have notaries here at the town office for our town office needs. Any other questions on that? So next line is meals and lodging, and this supports part of that education line for rooms and meals for education and training. This budget line is $1,010. The bulk of that is that conference in fall of
New England?
the New England Conference in the fall, and then meals, clerk meetings at the county level, and that includes more than one. So there's deputy clerk and clerk are included. For MMA, NEMCI, New England is that one. So that's really, it's basically just rooms and meals. Mostly most of them are meals. The only one that requires lodging is the week-long conference in New Hampshire in the fall. And then for mileage, again, supporting the education line, mileage and travel reimbursement, we have at $450. Part of that is elections, because there's a lot of driving around getting things set up. But 10, 20, that's a total of about $50 or so. But then mileage and travel reimbursement for the conference and the county meetings in Augusta and Waterville, and the New England conference. So, uh-oh,
You okay?
there's another one. Okay. Okay, any questions? No. Ray's going to be okay.
I'm okay.
And next, we have contracted services. This is $1,260. This is for our Election Day patrol. We have to have a police presence at the elections. And basically, if you've all seen our police officer, just sort of patrolling the area and making sure everything looks the way it should. And it doesn't just put a lot of people at ease. It's something that's really important to have just in case we need it. So we just budgeted that using Chief McGee's numbers. Next, we have professional services and records management. That's $10,450. It covers the annual online fee for online updates for municipal codes. It covers keeping our ordinances up to date online. This year we did increase. We had, way back when we had 4 supplements a year, then we switched to 2, but 2 really wasn't enough. We really have to do 4 a year to keep it up to date and have the online ordinances reflect more current status. So the remainder is ballot coding and programming for the voting machines.
Lisa, real quick, if I could. The professional services, are you saying that because you're going from 2 to 4, is that why the larger jump is what you're saying?
Yes.
The 16? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that?
Yeah, I have one. On the mileage, is that the 50-something cents of the federal
Yeah.
guideline? Because
No.
that would go awful fast if it wasn't.
This is at,
Don't know, we did.
Is it at that rate?
Yeah, it's
Because
based
it
on.
won't take long to burn that because I think it's around 55 cents now the federal government gives you per mile.
Yes.
So that's what that figure is.
Yeah, based on, I think they have a New Hampshire one, and a lot of the other ones are local, so.
Because, like I said, it won't take long to eat that up at that rate, right? So just making sure there's enough, because you're going to need make sure she gets her training and
Yeah,
reimbursed.
and it's kind of going back to where we were before, because during the pandemic, everything was virtual. So it'll be interesting that this is going to be the very first year where we get to, interact with people again, and we get to go to live trainings. So we'll get a better feel of the the exact number based on the trainings that we'll go to in live. And we are seeing that some of the trainings are pulling back in some instances. We're like, actually, no, we're going to do this virtual. So it's still an unknown of what next year will bring.
Right. Absolutely, yep. Just want to make sure you have enough to do your training.
So the last line is equipment. It's at $2,800. That's the same as it was last year. It covers two really important things. One is the maintenance contract for our vault shelving and roller shelving that we have in the vault. They maintain that each year and make sure that it stays in good shape so that we can make the most of it. And then the elections, that takes care of leasing equipment because we don't own all the equipment that we use. So that takes care of leasing equipment. That is $1,767. And then we have a little extra in there for printer drums, maintenance items, replacement printers, that sort of thing, just in case. We put $300 in for that. So. And that was my last line.
Any questions about that department as a whole? We actually have some big experience rooms tonight that we may not have back again. So if there's any history type questions, Twyla would be the best one to answer those tonight.
I think you're in great hands.
I'm sure
It's
we
a quick
are.
study.
I have a question. Is there a Boston Post cane?
So that is usually given to the oldest resident in town.
Yeah, I was wondering if
And
Kurt still has it.
And she has said that she's just not interested right now. And so it's been our policy to make sure that we continue to give it to the oldest resident. And when they don't want it, we just sort of save it. The last one that I experienced that same situation, she didn't want it at 95. She didn't want it at, she took it at 100. And she lived to 105.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, there might come a point where she'll take it.
So right now, nobody has it.
Well, no, it would be for her if she was interested in it. So, yeah, at this point, she just doesn't like that kind of attention. But you never know. Might convince her.
There is one on display in the hallway.
The original's on display, and then we ordered a replica. At some point, we paid like $80 for the replica, and then we have a plaque. So we give them a plaque, and the replica comes back to us. But the other gentleman that we gave it to just prior to this one, I mean, he was jumping up and down for joy. We have a picture of him in the air. So it's a pretty exciting event, and I'm sure you'll get to do that soon. Yeah.
Perfect. Just again, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that this is Twyla's last official meeting, in a sense.
It is.
And we do appreciate everything you've done, and you probably haven't heard that some, but you haven't heard it enough because you have a lot to make up for.
Thank you.
But again, thank you very much, and it's been a privilege.
It's been an honor to serve the residents. I really, really have enjoyed it. So, be back.
Okay, we're all set with that department. We'll move on to the next. I know we may.
Jim, can I just make one comment about the budget format? I think has changed this year, and it doesn't please me. I think it's a bit awkward. If you remember, usually there used to be a budget on one page. There was multiple years of budgeting on one page, and now there's like the current budget on one page. You have to flip to the next page for the current budget. There's no prior year at all. So when you were asking a question a while ago about prior year stuff, you couldn't look at the previous year to see if there was a trend, or I just think it makes it awkward to review. I don't know, maybe it's just me.
No, I agree. There has been a change, and last year was even more different, if that's such a word. One of the things that we've seen, and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, is the transition to the new software system. A lot of that data is not as easy as it's supposed to have been to actually bring up and just actually have 3 or 4 years of running. Because I'm the same way. I'd like to look back 3 or 4 years just to actually see what the trend was moving forward. Last year was a very unusual year, right? Because a lot of things were different. But I know they've done their best, and moving forward, if you have any recommendations. I mean, the book's already put together. It's actually a little bit different this year, but
It's 2 years in.
absolutely. I think with this new system, once it's integrated 100%, we should be able to get some real fancy stuff. Last year, we actually didn't have any books at all. We actually did it all on Zip Drive, which was kind of a little bit easier in some aspects, but to me, it was more difficult because I'm a paper guy. I can look at it, but especially when it comes to updates. Hopefully, we won't have many updates this year, but I'm sure we'll have a few. So, but I do appreciate the input. Next department.
Okay, I'd like to, if it's all right, Counselor, if we could switch and put Lisbon Emergency next. We'll just move the order. We'll do Lisbon Emergency, and after that, we'll do the Fire Department. I'll do EMA, and I'll do the Police Department last since I'm here all night. So if the Lisbon Emergency would like to come up, you can present. Thank you.
How you doing, sir?
Good, how are you? Good. So, start with Chief McDonald. Greatly regrets not being able to make it tonight. He is sick. Could not make it. My name is John Corson, Captain, Lisbon Emergency. With me tonight is Sylvia Hull. She is a member and also Board Director. For full disclosure, I am a vendor to the town through Black Bear Ladder, and I am an employee of United Ambulance. The last 12 months have been incredibly challenging to EMS in Maine. The fall of 2021, the vaccine mandate was implemented for healthcare in Maine. Lisbon Emergency lost 3 providers directly due to the mandate and 1 indirectly. 3 of these were paramedics and 1 basic EMT. If the vaccine mandate were rescinded, we would gain back these providers. At that time of the vaccine mandate, we had an emergency board meeting at the end of September and implemented emergency strategies to move forward, including a $2 an hour pay raise for all members. Before this pay raise, we were paying basic EMTs $14 an hour. This pay raise had its intended effect at the time, which was to retain our existing staff. The pay raise was not enough to recruit or backfill our lost staff. While our ambulance has been staffed at the advanced EMT or higher level at 99% of all shifts, our paramedic coverage dropped from 97% to 62%. The staffing crisis was a major problem in the past. The vaccine mandate and COVID had accelerated it. There is currently a severe EMS staffing crisis across the entire country. In December of 2021, the Maine EMS Board made a proclamation. The Board of Maine EMS acknowledges that we are in a staffing crisis, and we are committed to making this an immediate priority to obtain and recruit qualified professionals. While there are initiatives being discussed, there is no current definitive solutions to the staffing crisis being provided by Maine EMS or the state of Maine. During the Omicron spike this winter, EMS in our area was overwhelmed with emergency calls and transfers. Hospitals were beyond capacity, and incoming air patients were placed in beds and hallways. FEMA ambulances were brought into the area hospitals to help with transfers. When hospitals cannot transfer patients out of the hospital, they cannot admit more patients into the floors, creating a backup in the ER. Lisbon Emergency has sent a transfer ambulance to Lewiston since December to help with transfers on Fridays. This in turn helps the hospital to admit and discharge patients quicker. This transfer truck also helps generate revenue for Lisbon Emergency and is available for second emergency calls in Lisbon when not on a transfer. Our 22-23 budget is designed to get us back to normal staffing and recruit and retain our current staff. We performed a study of other area EMS agencies and found that we were well behind in payroll. With EMS staffing being a problem for the foreseeable future, we have placed our payroll where we believe we will be able to recruit and retain providers. We can no longer be below average in payroll. Our providers are loyal, and a majority have been with us for numerous years, but we must be competitive with other area services on our payroll in order to be able to recruit and retain. If we lose a provider, it is a 2 to 3 month process at minimum to rehire that position. It usually takes us about 6 months to replace a lost employee. It takes a long time to find a replacement, interview, background checks, onboard training, riding clearance shifts, and then putting them on the schedule. We are finding that when we hire providers that are new to EMS, we have to provide more training than we have in the past, as basic EMT schools are not performing real-world clinical training due to COVID. Our requests for increased stipend from the towns of Lisbon and Bowdoin are inflationary, but the majority is due to our increase in payroll. Additional items that have increased the budget are accountant fees, budget for $6,000 for an external audit, and additional computer expenses to implement new scheduling, employee certification tracking software, and inventory control software. This year's business plan includes a fully funded capital improvement plan for the future and is included in our requested stipend from the town of Lisbon and Bowdoin. We will be replacing ambulance 401, which is a 2009 wheel coach ambulance on a C4500 Chevrolet chassis. This ambulance is currently being used as a frontline ambulance. The chassis itself has been discontinued for 13 years, and parts for this ambulance are taking a long time to get in. This past fiscal year, ambulance 401 was out of service for roughly 5 weeks waiting on parts. It is actually currently out of service right now for the next 7 days waiting on another part. Our new ambulance is on order and will arrive roughly July of 2022. This will be our first new ambulance purchase since 2006. We did have to increase future yearly funding of the capital improvement plan in order to account for the extreme inflation over the last 12 months. We have been able to come in under budget for expenses for the last 9 years. This past fiscal year, we saw increased revenue due to increased call volume in the transfer truck. We had an excess of cash on hand of $100,000. We are using this excess cash on hand to reduce the amount of funding needed by the towns. Our goals for this coming year are to increase paramedic coverage back to 97%. We have been successful since the implementation of our requested budget has been out. We've actually hired 2 medics in the last month. Review and update our bylaws. Review and update our continuous and quality improvement plan. Independent financial audit. To look for better ways to provide patient care with our partners at Lisbon Police, Communication Center Fire, and Bowdoin Fire Rescue. To improve communication with our partner towns of Lisbon and Bowdoin. Lisbon Emergencies officers, board of directors, and membership would like to thank the towns of Lisbon and Bowdoin for their continued support of our service, and we look forward to continuing to work together in the future.
Any questions upon, do you, just for the public, could you actually just go over the numbers that were presented as far as for this year's budget and what the increases do actually represent, if you could, please?
The budget, so last year, fiscal year, we requested total from the town of Bowdoin of $52,851. This is for the entire year coverage of EMS. This year we went up to $111,542 on Bowdoin. That was passed at their last town meeting. Lisbon, last year we requested $199,841, actually this fiscal year. This coming fiscal year we're asking for $334,626.
Just so that way there the public could hear also. If I'll entertain any questions from Finance Committee or councilors at this point as far as on what's been presented. With the budget being presented, you feel that, you know, this year shouldn't be a problem as far as for maintaining through and keeping staffing?
Yes, we placed our payroll where we feel we can recruit and retain. We have already recruited a couple providers based on this coming year's budget. We were at 62% to 67% since the vaccine mandate on paramedic coverage in about when it started, I think mid-October. April we're actually back to 80% based on some new hires. We got lucky and did have one advanced EMT license up to a medic, so that helped as well.
Now, just a question on the units. You had mentioned that, how many units in total do you actually have?
2.
2. So with 401s down now several days, do you not do the transfers and water? Is that kind of how that plays out? Or?
It will probably play out. We're not positive. We're working with our partner that we do the transfers with to see if we can borrow an ambulance from them at that time. Borrowing ambulance is not easy because you can't just hop in an ambulance and say, hey, here we are. We have to go through Maine EMS, relicense that ambulance to your service. It's a little bit of a chore. So we're not, most likely if it was last second, which is kind of last second, we most likely will not be doing the transfer truck on Friday.
So under those circumstances where you know it's going to be down for a amount of time, the dispatch actually knows that there's there's basically for a secondary call that they have to reach out somewhere else in a sense.
Yes, yeah, when an ambulance goes out of service, our mechanic is out of town, and when it goes, especially for this one, because it's an old chassis, and the person that takes care of this chassis used to be the head of the division for the chassis at O'Connor GMC. So when it goes out of town, we tell Lisbon Com we're going out of service on that ambulance. Yep.
All right. And any other questions at all?
There hasn't been a budget, an audit since 2012,
An independent audit,
right?
correct?
Okay, and is there any way to get that audit done before the budget?
No.
There isn't?
No, an independent audit takes a couple months at least. As far as how we handle our finances are 100% open for anybody to take a look at. In years past, we give our general ledger, which tells you everything we've done, every transaction we've deleted, and so forth. We use QuickBooks Pro for our software. We make that available to anybody that wants it. So in the years past, if the town finance director wants that, we give that to them. Our accountant audits our books yearly. We have not done an independent since 2012 because the amount of money it costs to do that, we have not had in our budget.
Kurt, you actually had a question?
Yes. I'm not sure which page this is, but on one page here it says the budget 2022-23 for income, ambulance income is 419,000, and that's up only 7,000 over last year, and I just can't believe that.
What's the question? I'm sorry?
The income, why is the income only up the ambulance income up only $7,000?
Income doesn't go up with us for most years.
But you can come here and ask for 130,000.
Our expenses have gone up, but our income has not.
It's unbelievable.
We're not the only ones with this problem. It is across the state, and our budget is comparable to other towns. Yep.
About financing the new ambulances?
Yep.
I'm not sure. How do you, if you say it again, how would you plan to finance the new ambulances?
The new ambulances are in our CIP plan. The new one
Went too fast for me.
What's that?
Went too fast for me.
Not a problem. The new ambulances is shown in our capital improvement plan. The ambulance that we're buying right now,
300,000 or
yes,
350.
it's 289 that we're buying right now.
Two or one.
Sorry,
2 or 1.
we're buying one ambulance
Yep.
for $289,000.
Okay.
Yep. So we've saved up in our capital improvement plan. We are going to be financing this ambulance for 3 years on a 1.75% lease to own.
Well, couldn't you do it longer? Has a 10 or 15-year lifespan.
So if we did a 10-year lifespan loan, we're looking at a 5% to 6% interest rate, and we'll pay $54,000 in interest over that time.
Yeah, but I wouldn't have to pay it now. That's the thing.
So if we do that, we can do that, but we're going to have to go up in the towns about $8,000 a year because that's how much it's going to cost in extra interest.
Yeah, but it's a small price compared to the 134.
It's not going to change either way.
And I think that we had a budget presentation one night that was online that they did explain that a lot of the monies for the ambulance had already been put aside. So I mean, it's
Yes.
not like a full expenditure all at one time or over a 3-year period. So some of it actually has been already saved in a capital plan.
Correct.
From my remembrance.
Yes. Yep. So we have saved up over the years enough to pay for this ambulance out of our current cash on hand for our capital improvement plan because our capital improvement plan is fully funded to replace this ambulance and make the payments over the next 3 years. Pay it off, and then the next ambulance is scheduled for replacement in 2026, and we're going to do the same thing all over again. We're going to do a 3-year lease, hopefully at around 2 to 3%, and be able to pay that ambulance off. Yes, because if we don't do that, if we fund these ambulances and finance them over the course of 10 years, we're only going to pay $4,000 in interest over 3 years. If we finance that over 10 years, we're going to pay $55,000 in interest. So we're going to have to, so if we're financing 2 ambulances over 10 years on a amortized loan schedule, we're going to be paying $100,000 over 10 years in interest. And we're going to have to put that back on the towns, which is going to be $10,000 versus $8,000. But I'm sorry, it's going to be $100,000 versus $8,000 in interest.
Any other questions from?
We're saving $92,000.
Go ahead, sir.
Is there a budget committee recommendation for the budget as opposed? I thought I saw one piece of your budget or one of your emails. There was a budget committee recommendation and there was an officer recommendation, and they were 2 different numbers.
We had 2 different numbers on our payroll at our budget. So our budget, how we do our budget is it's a budget committee, which consists of Mark Bernier, who was a selectman from the town of Lisbon. Kayla was there when she was on the board in the beginning. George Roy from Lisbon Credit Union, who's a board director member. Myself, because I'm the financial captain, and then the chief of Lisbon Emergency. We had a lower pay scale payroll, and we had a higher pay scale. The lower pay scale was what we started with, and we ended up with a higher pay scale. And the reason why we ended up with a higher pay scale is when we completed our payroll study of the area, we found that our lower pay scale was not going to cut it. We were still going to be below average. We were still going to have problems with retaining and recruiting EMS providers. So we decided to go with the budget committee recommended, wound up final recommendation being going with a higher payroll scale of the 2 that we're looking at.
How many employees are there for Lisbon Emergency?
Oh, yeah, roughly about 20.
20 employees?
Yep, per diem. We do not, our only full-time staff member is the chief of service.
So the only full-time Lisbon Emergency person is the chief?
Correct.
And the payroll covers the per diem people?
Correct. The
And
payroll,
do they come and work, like at the barn when they're working, or are they at home, or
so
how do we do that?
So we are staffed 24/7. We're right across from E.T. Smith on Village Street. We're staffed 24/7, paid, and they are required to be at the base. We don't, the days of Lisbon Emergency being volunteer and coming in from home are over. We are there 24/7. If you're on staff, the shifts are either 12, 24, or 36 hours, mostly 12 or 24, and you are there with the ambulance ready to go on a call within, our goal is to have the wheels rolling within 2 minutes.
How many ambulances are you staffing usually, and where are they located?
1.
One in Lisbon?
Yep.
You also staff one in Lewiston, is my understanding?
We don't staff an ambulance in Lewiston. What we are doing is we're sending an ambulance to Lewiston on Fridays for an 8-hour shift to help with transfers, because usually Fridays is when the big transfer day is, and it's helping Central Maine and St. Mary's get the patients out on those higher
Does that bring
volume.
in more revenue to you guys?
It does.
Why isn't that reflected in a larger increase in ambulance revenue?
Because when we made the budget, we were not prepared for this to last as long as it has. We thought this would be done by now. We thought this was only for a month. It's continuing on. The other thing is that we keep 3 months of liquid cash on hand. If we have excess cash on hand, it's used to reduce the budget. Last year, when we did our budget, we had $50,000 excess cash on hand. We used that to lower the stipend for the towns. This year it was $100,000, mostly because we had an increased call volume due to COVID. So we used that $100,000 again to lower the stipends from the towns. We didn't take that money and keep it or try to go buy something extra. We're putting it back, and if that happens again this year, it'll be the same thing next year. We're going to take that excess cash and lower the stipend of the towns. We're a nonprofit. We don't need extra cash on hand.
I got a question on the payroll. So it's $675,000 for the year. PD's only 900. Got 5 times the employees, so I can't wrap my head around that number. It seems awful high for the few people.
Can't speak to PD, I can speak to Lisbon EMS. We have 2 people on staff 24/7. So if you average out the payroll, and let's say the payroll is average of $26 an hour times 8,760 hours per person, and then our chief of service. Plus workman's comp, plus payroll taxes. I don't know how many people Lisbon PD has on staff 24 hours a day.
Where are the per diem people? Are they like generally in Lewiston, Auburn, or are they all over?
Where do they
live? And
where
do
they live?
work for other ambulance services?
Yes, yeah. EMS as a hobby is done. The requirements to be an EMS provider are way too cumbersome now to just do it on the side. There are certain. I'm probably one of the very few left doing it, where I have a normal full-time day job. For me to, as an advanced EMT, which is what I am, I have to I have to renew my license every 3 years. I have to do 56 hours of clinical education in those 3 years, and it's out of my pocket, it's out of my time. I don't get paid a dime. I have to do it on my own time. And a lot of these classes I'm paying for out of my own pocket. But neither one of my services really cover it. There are also other things that you have to do. There's mandatory reporting for child abuse. There's all kinds of other trainings. There's mandatory training every year. I have worked 2 services, so I have mandatory trainings that I have to perform at both services. It's a lot of extra work that you don't see. I live in Augusta. I'm a Lisbon taxpayer, but I live in Augusta. I would say there's only a handful, maybe, I want to say 3 people that live in the area. Most of our other providers are outside of Lisbon.
And they work for other either hospitals or ambulance services?
Yes, the majority of the people we have are either in school, younger and in school and working EMS, because they're going for medical training as RN, respiratory, what's that? Or they're retired. Or they work other EMS jobs. As an EMS provider, it's incredibly, no EMS provider I know of, I've got a lot of friends in EMS, work 1 job. They work 2, 3, 4 jobs, and even people like me that EMS is not the primary job. And they work 60 hours a week would be the absolute bare minimum. Most work 80 to 100. Even if they're retired.
Any other questions before we move forward?
Would it make sense to hire full-time?
We could hire full-time, our budget would go up even more. Because right now, the only benefits we're paying is to our chief. If we brought on, you're talking about another 10 grand per employee, and we'd have to bring on at least probably 8 full-time people. And right now, every service in the state, I don't care what the service is, fire, EMS, hospital-based, whatever kind of EMS system you're in right now, it is hurting for staff. There are fire chiefs working ambulances right now to make sure that that ambulance rolls. This is not a Lisbon emergency problem. This is a state problem. This is a country problem. This problem is not going away. One of our people on staff, a captain, is a gentleman that he's a nurse practitioner. He's a paramedic. He works as a nurse practitioner. He works for us. He works for another fire EMS service as a paramedic. He also works in education. And one of the things that I asked him the other day was, I think we're graduating about 50 people a year as paramedics. He said, yeah, that's correct. And I said, I think we need about 120 medics in the state. He goes, yeah, that's correct. We're losing medics all the time due to attrition, due to moving on, because EMS is not treated as a career. It is not paid as a career. We were paying $20 an hour to a paramedic last year. I can go down to Target and make $21 an hour. A paramedic that has gone to school for 1,000 clinical hours. He went to that person went to school to get their basic EMT or their advanced EMT, and then they went on for a year of college. They're responsible for everything that happens on that ambulance. If I go on the ambulance with my paramedic partner that I work with at United and Lisbon, and I screw up, it's on her, it's not on me. And that person's getting paid $20 an hour to take care of another person's life.
How's the turnover rate with your people? I mean, you mentioned a lot of them are going to school and they're doing this to build up their resume or whatever you want to call it, and then do they just, you don't see them again, or?
Our service is pretty lucky in the fact that we have a lot of loyal people. We have a membership-based service, so there's a lot of blood and sweat equity in what we do. We're very proud of our service. A lot of us have made changes in our service, a lot of us, that have made a difference. So we're lucky in that aspect. But EMS is generally, we're losing people left and right because we're not a career. Do you want to stay a paramedic at $20 an hour? Or do you want to move on to be an associate nurse and make $35 to $38 an hour? That's minimum. An associate's nurse making $35, $38 an hour is pretty minimum right now. And that's the same amount of education as a paramedic, and nowhere near well, I shouldn't say that. It's the response to the danger of being a paramedic is much greater than being an associate's RN.
Set? Sure.
In your budget, it says accounting fees, $600 for last year's budget, $6,650. Is that something I'm missing?
No, our accounting charges is $600, about $6 to $650 every year. The $6,000 was for the independent audit.
Which we're going to do.
Which we're going to do, yes. Yeah, we've been so tight on our budget every single year. Every single year, our board looks at it and says, okay, is this the year we're going to do our independent audit? And every year it's do an independent audit or do we buy medical supplies? This is the year we're doing it.
You hire a professional auditor.
Yes, we're going to do a real independent audit of our books.
And the only other question was workers' comp. It was $12,000 last year, and it's $45,000. Is that just because of the number of people are you paying, or what is that?
No.
Rate change? Or?
Unfortunately, we had 2 bad accidents last year that raised our mod rate from about 0.9 to I'm going to be within very close to my mod rate, but it's not exact. Yeah, 0.9 to 1.77. They were both. Yeah, they were both pretty severe accidents. That there was nothing. They were freak act. There's nothing we could have done. There's nothing we could have done to prevent it. There's nothing we can do in the future to prevent it. They were freak accidents. EMS is dangerous. Unfortunately, we've been very lucky in years past. It takes
about 3 years to pay it off.
Exactly. Yeah. So this will be that and the increased payroll.
A lot of bad news going on here.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
With that being that, we thank you for the presentation, sir.
Thank you, John. So moving ahead, if we can have the fire chief come up and present his budget.
Good evening. I would like to say that I'm sure everybody knows what the fire department does, but our name is a little misleading. The days of the fire department just doing fires is long gone. Really what the fire department is an all hazards response agency. Really the only thing that we don't respond to is law enforcement incidents, and that's not always 100% true. We respond to everything from power line calls to water rescues, automobile rescues, and obviously the fire calls. We respond on EMS calls in conjunction with an emergency on serious calls, and we also respond to medical calls when they're not able to respond. So our realm of responsibility has grown dramatically over the last 20 to 30 years of just doing fire-related calls to doing a little bit of everything. So right off the bat, we'll get into the payroll issues as the payroll numbers have gone up, and that's, as you're well aware of, the payroll study and the plan that the administration's put in place is reflected in the payroll lines. One thing you'll see that's different this year versus last year is we split up the non-supervisory line, which used to encompass all the call firefighters. With last year's hiring of our first full-time firefighter, what we did this year was we put the full-time employment under the non-supervisory line and put the call firefighters and the temporary seasonal line. You will see the 90,000 there for the full-time positions. That is an added full-time firefighter in this year's budget. As you go through and you look at the workers' comp and the retirement, health insurance, those numbers are all reflected upon that additional full-time position that's been requested this year. One other thing you'll see, before I forget, under the temporary seasonal line is that number also incorporates a couple things that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to eliminate, we've had different pay scales for different tasks, and I'm trying to eliminate having one firefighter having a couple different pay scales. They will get a pay scale if they went on a call in the middle of the night, and then if they're coming in to do a shift during the day or do a detail or do maintenance or whatever, they're getting paid a different rate. And we're just trying to eliminate the different rate and go to one pay rate. So that's what's reflecting upon that. Plus, my goal, as a previous councilors can probably attest to, the last few years, my goal was to get 3 people on during the daytime. So with an additional one full-time person, that line also incorporates additional hours to put a per diem hours in play to try to get a third person on during the daytime with the full-time staff, because those are our more critical hour when it comes to coverage. With more of the volunteers working regular, that 8 to 5 job out of town, that's where we lose people, and those are where we have the most critical lack of manpower, is those hours. So we're trying to get people in the station. It does a couple things for us. One, it gives us people. And 2, it reduces the response times of getting these trucks out the door. 30 years ago, I could probably get my trucks on the road within 4 minutes of time to call. Now, with people living further and further from in town, it's taking up to 10 minutes to get a truck on the road, relying totally on the volunteers. And this helps reduce that time frame, especially with daytime traffic going down 96.
Chief, if I may, so with this budget, if it's presented and goes through as it is, during the day, there'll be two people that are regular people, actually, that have paid 40 hours a week.
Yep.
And so the per diem is that just one?
There'll be one additional per diem on to assist, hiring off my regular guys, the regular staffing.
So
to
there'd
put
be
a third person on.
people during the day that would actually be staffing. Okay.
Yep, that would be the goal.
Yep.
If at the bare minimum is to try to at least get people there. So as my full-time guys have, I say guys, I'm sorry, the full-time personnel have vacation time, sick time, EPL time. You should try to backfill those as well. So at least have a couple people on duty during the daytime.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my plan cost me per. So I'm just going right down through the line. Office supplies, that's the paper and things like that. That stays pretty consistent. Operating supplies is at $9,000. That's, I originally was going to decrease that, but as we're seeing through the supply chain issues and things getting more expensive, it was left at that mark there. Postage is at $75. The clothing and boot allowance line has gone up. That's mainly because we need to give my full-time people a uniform allowance, and then with the hiring of a new person, that offsets that as well. That also includes part of our recruitment retention plan. So you think yourself $4,000 for including me, 4 people, that's a lot of money. But what we do with that money as well is, as our call firefighters complete their firefighter training and certifications, and they're on the department for at least a minimum of 1 year, we purchase them a Class A or full dress uniform as part of their retention program. And those run just shy of $1,000 for setup. So that's where that money is. To explain that one. Cell phone allowance. The physicals, not only do we have to put a firefighter through a pre-employment physical when we hire them, we also every year, as we wear our respirators, we're required under federal regulations to go through a respiratory clearance, and that includes medical screenings. So they get the medical screenings every year, and it's based off age group, and for those of us over the age of 40, we get it every year. So that covers those costs. Parts and supplies, that's basically something breaks, I need a part. That's what that is. The one thing that's going to come up as questionable, in my opinion, is the gas and diesel pricing budget. Not knowing what the prices are going to be for our next upcoming contract for fuel. As I stated in my narrative, these prices are based off the current rate of what we're paying for fuel, off of what my average fuel consumption is. So that numbers could change as we know more going into May maybe.
Yeah, end of May is when they start going out to the bid. We can't go out earlier than that, and the dates are October to October. It's very strange how it's set up, but
the longer you can wait, the better price you're going to get.
that's
So
the way I'm
we do
looking
not
at it.
want
Yeah,
it right now.
Yeah.
things will get better eventually.
The tire budget, that's, if I know I'm planning on replacing tires on my trucks, that will fluctuate. If I know I'm going to have to buy tires, I'll put it in there. Other than that, I keep some money there in case, that's the in case line, something goes wrong. Hopefully I don't have to spend it, but if I lose a tire, I got to take care of the tire. So that's that line. Professional development's at $7,500. That went up last year because of not being able to get some of the training in-house and trying to send people out to cover those costs. Unfortunately, this past year, we've had, we did not send anybody to the firefighter academy this year, so the money didn't get spent. And we had a couple of classes where classes were canceled due to instructors not be able to show up. So we didn't spend that entire line this year, but the intent is always to try to make sure I have money on hand to get my firefighters trained.
Question on that, Chief, if
Sure.
I may. Now that we actually have potentially 2 full-times, is there more potential of actually having in-house training more so than the idea of
Yeah, there's always areas where we bring in outside instructors for some specialized stuff. But sending, it costs over $1,000. It sounds cheap compared to the police academy. Looking over at Harry, but it cost me over $1,000 to get a firefighter through the fire academy. So I'm sitting, if I send 3 or 4 guys, that's going to be roughly $4,500 to send 4 people to the fire academy, and then sending off to like the fire instructor in classes. Those can't be done in house. If I do, I still have to hire an instructor to come in to do those. So things like that. A lot of our in-house trainings, our monthly trainings, are usually done by our own people, but these are those specialty trainings that get people out and doing those sort of things.
Thank you.
Yep. I'll look down here at Councilor Robichaud. My mileage is 150. I have town vehicles that we use most of the time to send people around with, so that usually mostly covers things like toll reimbursement.
Yeah. It just doesn't seem like enough to me. That's why
Right.
I'm asking, right? I mean,
But well, thankfully, in my department, I have some vehicles that we use to offset that.
nice.
So very rarely do we have to reimburse them for mileage. It's more or less we're reimbursing for like tolls.
Got it.
The capital reserve line is the $75,000 that we set aside every year for replacement and refurbishment of fire apparatus. So when we're planning the future purchase of vehicles, it's part of the plan that was improved. I want to say, looking at Curtis, 2002, 2003, in that time frame. Put so much money aside over the course of the year, so as we replace the vehicles, it's not that big of an impact to the taxpayer. We try to do that process. So that's that line. The R&M equipment line, I'm skipping the utilities. You guys okay with that? The phone, the water, the sewer? Yeah, okay. The R&M equipment line, that's basically my general maintenance line. That covers all of my annual required testing, whether it's my annual flow testing for my air packs, my annual pump testing, annual ladder testing, annual hose testing, and it also includes if something breaks and I got to send it out to be repaired. If it has to go to Ford, that's what that comes out of. If I got to send a piece of equipment off to a service to get repaired, that's where it comes out of. So that's general maintenance of everything on that one. The R&M radios, it says R&M, but really that's my radio lines where I buy radios, pagers, and things like that. One of the things you'll see is it shows a increase. However, it's part of the CIP plan for me to buy 6 new radios a year over the next few years to update my old radios to the newer digital capable, P25 capable radios that are soon to be required. And somehow, somewhere, somewhy, don't know quite what happened. I do know what happened with the shifting of money last year from undesignated funds to budget to undesignated funds. The extra money I put in that line last year kind of got lost in the mix. So what shows like a dramatic increase was just a oops of movement of funds around. So there's really isn't much of an increase in my actual line. Just from on paper, there's a pretty looks like an increase. Did I explain that one quite right?
Yes, you did.
Yeah. The firefighter foam basically is our Class A foam. All of our trucks carry Class A foam, and that's the line I use to buy the foam. We buy it in 55-gallon drums because it's less per gallon, but doing it that way. And it's about, remember how much it is.
Did we not expend any last year at all? Looks like we actually...
No, I actually have. I just took delivery of two barrels within the last few weeks. Where is it? I've got 50 expended so far. 50% expended. So, and it really does vary from year to year, Counselor. If we get a really busy fire year, we'll go through it more versus less. So.
Actually, about 4 barrels is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
Just under 4 barrels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Does it expire?
We don't keep it long enough for it to expire. But yes, technically it does expire. It will gel up after a while if you don't use it.
How long is the shelf life on it?
I'm not 100% sure. It depends on the brand. But we've been using one particular brand since we bought the first line of trucks in 2003. And we do that because there's always potential if you start mixing brands that aren't compatible, they will gel up in the tank, they'll get in your phone system, and you're spending thousands of dollars to fix your phone system. So we stick with one brand. We have been for the past 20 years now.
When's the last time we used foam?
Last fire. We use it on every fire. So we used it in, let me think back. What was that?
In Lisbon or
Yeah.
somewhere else?
No, we've used it. We definitely used it at the fatal fire we had back in August. I think that was the last fire we had. We use them on car fires. We use them on house fires. We use them on woods fires. We use it on every fire.
Good.
Yeah. What it does here, it reduces the water surface. So if you take a bowl of water and you put a pine needle on top of that, and you see it sits on top. Now, if I were to add a little bit of that concentrate to it, it breaks the water tension. Next thing you know, that needle's going to sink. So what it does is when we spray the water onto, say, a vertical surface, now that water is going to soak into that wood, cooling it down, versus the water running off out the door. It reduces, in the long run, it reduces property damage because we're using less water. The EMS supplies, that's pretty self-explanatory right now. That's at $2,400. We upped that one last year because of the cost, everything we've seen with COVID. That will go up even more as the main EMS changes their protocols on what we have to have for equipment. But right now, that's what we're at for $2,400 for that. We do a lot of one-on-one exchanges with the transporting ambulance on scene. So if we use something, we tend to do a lot of exchange on site. So if we use like an oxygen mask, you might get another oxygen mask off the transporting ambulance. So that's why you don't see our budget's a little smaller than what you might see out of Lisbon Emergency on that aspect. Personal protective equipment. This line carries all of my turnout gear, which is the structural firefighting gear. This will cover our air masks. This covers like reflective vests, boots, gloves, the hoods, the helmets, everything that is protective equipment for the firefighters to wear comes out of that line right there.
So turnout gear in a sense, is that actually, how does this line actually coordinate with the, your capital plan? Is there so much?
Yeah, there is $15,000 in that line just for turnout gear, which is 5 sets of gear a year. Hose replacement, we are seeing the point where we're seeing the need to start replacing some of our smaller hoses. We've been looking at replacing our large diameter hose over the last few years, and now we're at the point we have to replace our small diameter hose. This is our 1.5 inch, 1 3/4 hose lines we use on Fire Attack. And what we're seeing is we've had some hose that you think is, oh, this isn't that old, and you realize it's 20 plus years old and it's starting to delaminate. And we got to start replacing these hoses a little more frequent. And we have a batch we have to get to replace. And that line is up by 3,000, well, 41% increase because we have some hoses delaminating we got to replace. So that's what that line right there is. And the big one on the bottom is equipment. This includes everything from hand tools like axes and poles and things like that, chainsaws, to the extrication equipment, which was in the CIP this year. And the the current councils who've been here for a while can tell you that in years past, a lot of this equipment has been taken out of undesignated funds, and this year it's in the operational budget. There is in the CIP 28,000, 29,000, somewhere in there, for the replacement of the remainder of our hydraulic rescue tools, which was started 5 years ago. We started that one out and planned it out. We broke it up over a 5-year plan, so we weren't doing it all at once. So this is the second half of that replacement process of replacing our extrication tools. So that's what's within that line. That's the big one that brought that one up. And the other thing that's in there, which is not on a line item, but it's in the CIP, is the replacement of car 4. Budgeting $59,000 to buy a pickup truck. That includes outfitting of the vehicle, which is, I believe, targeted for TIF. But that's under the CIP for this year as well. So that's what I got.
Questions from council?
What do you do with the old hoses?
Get cut up. Sometimes they go to sewer or a wreck. But other than that, sometimes when we start cutting them up, we'll cut the couplings off them so they can't be reused. And every once in a while, somebody wants them for their wharfs or their decks, their docks.
So they're available for people who want them.
Once we tag them out of service, usually I offer them up to like the sewer or rec department to use them because they're not using them with the same pressure as we are. And then as we get ready to trash them, I'll offer them up.
On the telephone line,
Mm-hmm.
50512. What is the E911 loop?
I don't think I can answer that one.
That looks like an old.
I don't think I can answer that one for you. This is one of those things that's always been plugged in by somebody else besides me.
Maybe you can answer how you can get rid of that $1,500 for it. Because I suspect that's like a back in the day thing when we had.
We're still paying for it?
When we were PSAT?
Yeah, because we're still paying for it as of right now.
Who we pay?
I don't know the vendor off the top of my head, but I can look that up.
You know, I have to find out what that is.
So I'll be up front with
I
the
mean, we were a PSAT back
Yeah.
in the day. And we did have E911 that we dispatched out of our comm center. And we had tied in the fire departments, but we don't do that anymore. So we're not a PSAT. We haven't been for years. That's what it is.
No,
worth
into it.
looking into for sure.
Maybe you know, Ryan.
We'll have to look into it.
Yep.
Questions from council or finance? Just one for myself, if no one else. I didn't see anything figured in this year budget. Maybe there won't be, but for this upcoming season with potential moving of location for temporarily while the road's being redone, is there any costs that you think would incur the idea of maybe relocating or repositioning for a period of time?
I've had some conversations with McGee Construction and with Shane Amaros, and they advised me that they think that it may only have to relocate for a day here, a day there, maybe a couple days as they're working right in front of the fire station. So with that being said, we should be able to be okay to relocate the Public Works for a couple days. I will say that my big fear was we're going to have to relocate for a few weeks. And trying to find a place to put 3 fire trucks for a few weeks was difficult. Haven't been very lucky with that one. So right now I feel better after talking to them. I met with them after the we had a start construction meeting on Zoom one day, and I met with them the very next day before the Main Street meeting, and they left me feeling better that we should be okay. Now, one of the things I was talking to interim town manager McGee about is that while they are doing construction on Main Street, I need to have the firefighters parking on Booker Street at that parking lot, and we need to have some stairs so they can get up from the parking lot up to behind the station, which isn't there now. They have to jump. You have to jump a wall, so we have to construct some stairs for them to be able to get up and through. That's the only cost as of right now that I can see.
The question I had was with discussion we had about traffic flow is typically you take a left out of the fire department. It sounds like during construction you'll have to take a right because you would be going against traffic. Is that actually something you've actually planned for?
As long as we can take it. The only problem that we have is that 90% of the time we're taking a left out of that fire station.
But you won't be able to once they start the traffic pattern of next week or the week after, right?
Yeah, because he
Left
said
turns.
I saw the. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but he said to me this morning, right? Yeah.
So no left turns after they actually break ground there. So I mean, that to me, that's going to change your
Change your operations
pretty drastically. Yeah. Anyway, so I was just curious if that was if there was anything that needed to be considered into this budget. But it sounds like you got your handle on it. So.
Well, yeah, because really what's going to happen is I hate to say it, it's going to have to come out of if we're going to start having issues soon with Main Street, I need to build those steps now and not wait for the next budget, which means finding money somewhere to do it. That's the challenge, especially as we're cranking down a little bit on this year's budget. It's something that the previous town manager and I had discussed prior to her leaving, but as she, what happens when someone leaves, things kind of.
We're gonna have to take a trip to the transfer station, see if we can find some scrap wood out there and get a few of those firefighters together.
See what can happen.
Yeah, we got enough carpenters. We're just a matter of getting the wood.
I got a question on the 2 days. What about the PPE? I mean, when you took me for a tour, they definitely have a lot of that, right? So
yeah. So what would have to happen is while those trucks are relocated at Public Works, even though it's not ideal and we kind of frown upon it this day and age, is they'll have to keep their PPE with them. Yeah.
How large a set of steps would you need?
I'm not sure if you've seen the Booker Street parking lot.
I know that. Yeah.
But it will have to be able to get those steps from where the parking lot is up to the back of the fire station. So you're probably talking about steps up, a landing, steps up to get to the.
Yeah, you need a landing.
Yeah.
Good 10 feet there, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's doable. Just
It's doable. It's a matter of getting the right person to do it in a timely fashion. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
The good thing is we have a nice parking lot right there now. That is actually a help.
Yeah.
Yep. Are you going to actually? I haven't heard anything yet, but will there be a certain area that designated to point with signage? So actually, it will be accessible for firefighters to come in. There's different days that go by. They're just checking it, and there are different days. There are different. How to say it? Lack of parking spots, but sometimes it's sporadically parked, so it would be very difficult for someone to pull in.
I'm hoping that just because I'm looking at what we have for available daytime staffing, that'll be used mostly at night. We see the most vehicles in the evenings and nights, so not necessarily during the workday as much.
Sure, it can be worked out. Just
No,
making a plan.
Absolutely. No.
Any other questions on fire before we move on?
What is the, you're asking for another full-time firefighter,
Absolutely, yes, sir.
and part of that justification is that you can roll a unit faster because.
That's an added bonus, because as you're well aware, in our industry, time is money. You know, but what it comes down to is that not only are we talking the general lack of people who want to get into emergency services, the general lack of volunteers is the big thing that's a priority right now in the fire service. I mean, you look at any agency right now that relies upon volunteers, whether you're talking the Red Cross, Parks and Rec, the fire department, people don't want to volunteer anymore. And what we've seen is our attrition rate staying the same. People are leaving the fire service at the same rate. No one's coming in. So right now, I don't have a very big daytime staffing. My daytime staffing, really, without my full-time people, revolves around off-duty Lewiston firefighters, and I got 3 of them. And some of them work the same shifts together, and a couple of retired guys. I had a call on Davis Street one day where I had 2 people, not including myself, show up for a reported gas fire and a stove. We had a electrical fire one day on Booker Street, and I had 2 people show up for this during the daytime. So this is the type.
What do you do when you only have 2 people?
I start screaming.
Well, my question, I don't want to get lost in the weeds with this, but my question was, if we have those 2 firefighters, is there a minimum staffing requirement to roll a truck?
This is kind of a tricky question. I'll just.
That's all I'm about tricky questions.
Yeah. So.
Entry, isn't it?
It's more right. It's more about entry. So federal OSHA guidelines says that in order for me to enter in an atmosphere that's immediately dangerous to life and health, what we call an IDLH atmosphere. Now that atmosphere could be mechanical or environmental. So the river, mechanical, rapid water, it's very immediately dangerous. Or going to
we get back in the weeds again. I
right.
just meant.
So it requires me to have 4.
Okay. Do you have to sit there and wait for 4 people to show up before you can pull out of the barn?
I'll go with 3 if I'm around.
So you got to have 3 before you can roll out of the barn. So if you have
one person to operate the truck and 2 firefighters to work.
If you have 2 firefighters there, they got to sit there and wait for a volunteer to show up so they can go.
Yeah.
If there's one available.
Right.
What is the average response time now?
The average response time now, it's 10 minutes.
10 minutes. It doesn't seem that long to me.
It's 10 minutes.
Is that
Now
long?
that's the average.
Is that long by industry standards? Is that long?
Oh, that's long. They're yeah, right. They really do when
What
they
should it
plan.
be?
4.
4 minutes? That means you got to be sitting in the truck.
Yeah, 4 minutes is what the industry is what they're going for. So it's and I say average. I'm saying it's some days it's quicker, and other days it's longer. So that's just the average of the course of the
So
year.
the two firefighters might have to sit there for 10 minutes waiting for that 3rd guy to show up.
Theoretically, yes. But what
Or
we're
it could be 1 firefighter waiting for 2.
because if there's 2 there, you're only waiting for 1. Versus if you're sitting there with nobody and you're waiting for 3 to show up,
Or if you have 1.
or waiting for 2, which was happening before January, where Glenn was my full-time firefighter was sitting there, and he was by himself and waiting for 2 guys to show up to get the truck on the road. Yeah.
How fast does fire spread?
Fire doubles in size every couple minutes. If those who were around during Moxie Day a few years ago, we had a sprinkler demonstration. That trailer cell was fully rocking within 2 minutes. And by that time, we don't usually have even the 911 call coming through yet. So fire moves fast.
Any other questions, Council? Finance? So during the day, we actually have 2 stations at this point.
Yep.
And someday we may have 1. But during the day, your Lisbon staff, do they report directly to Lisbon Falls Station? If there is an available person? 'Cause
There
really don't do much.
is no daytime Lisbon staff.
If there was a Lisbon staff during the day and someone was available, do they go to Lisbon Station? Or
They
do
always go to their assigned station because that's where their gear is. And because usually around 2 o'clock in the afternoons when they start filtering in like 1 an hour, there might be another person who's available. but they always go to the station. That's where their gear is. And if no one shows up, they might bring the squad or the brush truck with them on the call. They just can't roll the big truck. If they do, it might be after their trucks go by, they'll come back them up.
At that point, they
Right.
could assist the Lisbon staff to actually get that
Yeah.
fourth person if they need the entry.
But to be openly, again, bluntly honest, the Lisbon Village Fire Station, the E.T. Smith House Company, 98% of the people in that building work out of town during daytime hours. There's nobody out of that fire station during the daytime. Usually at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Joey Robital gets out of work from the school department, and then you might get somebody out of work at 3, and then they start rolling in after 4 or 5. But from like 5 o'clock on, I get almost guaranteed there's not going to be a truck out of that fire station.
Okay.
Yep.
That's it. Thank you very much, sir. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Next
Okay,
one, would you like an order, sir?
moving along, we'll go to EMA, and I'll be doing that one. So the emergency management director is Lisa Ward, and she's resigning from that position. She's been a big help over the years, so I just wanted to thank you for that. We've had many great meetings together, and I'm sure we'll still be talking about many things in the future, EMA related, but she has been an asset to that position. The funding is $1,799. That is for personnel, which accounts for 26 hours over the course of a year. The mission of the EMA director is to ensure that notification is made to the general public of Lisbon that the threat for impeding disasters is present, to minimize the effects of a disaster once it has occurred, to provide for the community of local government, continuity of local government, and to cooperate with other municipalities and agencies, both governmental and non-governmental, in meeting the citizens' needs before, during, and after disaster. And the EMA has been pretty instrumental in the past several years. They were able to get grant funding and put together the shelter down at the high school. Hopefully we never have to use it, but boy, it's really nice that we have something like that in this community. So hats off for that as well. Most recently in the past year, we worked on different plans in case there was ever a dam breach or a flood in Lisbon Falls. And that's still in the works with Androscoggin EMA as far as funding sources for potential sirens. Right now, most likely it'll be reverse 911 calls. Heaven forbid something happened down that Davis Street, Canal Street area, but we do have plans in place along with the fire department to make sure that we respond adequately. So these are just some of the things that the EMA director works with us. Councilor Moore has talked about starting up the public safety committee again, which I am very interested in getting that back up and running, and having annual meetings monthly, hopefully, to be able to discuss this further and also continue to look into grant funding. So it's an important position. It's a position we have to have as well, but it's going to be the non-supervisory with the unemployment insurance, workers' comp, and the FICA, but the total for that line item is $1,799. So,
Questions from council? Yes, sir.
Why is Lisbon Emergency stipend in this?
So
Unless
I
I've
talked.
read it different.
That's going to be changing. It's not going to be stipend after this budget. We're actually going to be putting it in its own line item since we contract with Lisbon Emergency. This wasn't how it's been done previous, and that's not a great answer, but that's just how it was done, and I didn't want to go changing things coming into an interim role.
Okay.
Just kind of working through it, but that's very observant, and we actually just talked about that recently about putting it in its own line item.
And I neglected to ask the gentleman from Lisbon Emergency, do we have a contract proposal with them?
Not yet, no.
Are we going to require that?
We have discussed that we will have a contract, so when it's signed, when the council decides on the budget, there should most definitely be a contract with Lisbon Emergency.
We should have that before the budget, though, shouldn't we? Or not?
We have to decide what we're going to pay them.
Yeah.
Part of the contract.
It's already started. We've had back and forth with them with the contract. So there is a contract. It's not signed. It won't be signed until it's agreed upon by the budget, by the council. Correct. Yep.
Any other questions for council? I have a couple.
Okay.
In the lapse of actually Lisa leaving the post, do we actually have someone that's actually taken it over until we actually become have the ability to actually have someone else fill that position?
Go ahead, Lisa.
So, having been in that position for as long as I was, we are legally required by federal law to have someone do that. Often, it can temporarily be held. In smaller towns, it's permanently held by other people, but it can be temporarily held by police or fire or another agent of the town.
I think we are going to be going out to add very shortly. There's been several other positions, and where Lisa was the deputy clerk, soon to be clerk, she's kind of stayed in that for now, but obviously that's coming to an end here shortly. But that is something that we will be going out to get a new EMA director for the community. I do have concerns about it being a police chief or a fire chief. My personal opinion, it shouldn't be the chief of police or the fire chief, for the simple fact, if both of us are at an emergency scene, the last thing we should be doing is tying up that position where they really should be in contact with the Androscoggin EMA, therefore getting us more resources from the entire county and also the state. So we're not being adequate, I guess you could say, and getting the appropriate services to our community. So
I think definitely putting out an ad, you may actually get people that are interested that you probably would have never thought of. With that being said, is the amount that we have budgeted adequate compared to other communities for what they pay their directors?
Yeah, it went up slightly. I don't have that number right in front of me. It was a very slight amount, but that came in at the market.
Just want to make sure that if we go out, that we actually can make sure that we can address the concerns. So.
Yeah, the hourly wage is comparable based on the study. The only question would just be the hours. Right now it's for 26 hours a year. Not sure what other surrounding municipalities, if it's more than that, but
Okay, but we're on it.
Civil defense director, way back in the 60s and 70s. And it was,
I like that sound.
Yeah, exactly. You stand around there, Santa said he had a little helmet and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds like we might have someone on the finance committee that might be interested.
Aerated siren behind the house. Yeah.
We had a radio set up in the old PD that was he would come in and when they did the checks, and he would answer when they did the radio checks and stuff. Yeah. Frank. Yeah.
And the guy could conjure and everything.
Huh?
Guy could conjure.
Yeah, guy.
All right. With that being said, we're going to move on. Next item, please.
Can I interject real quick?
Sure.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman? One more question for our fire chief. How many, in a comparable size municipality, how many have full-time firefighters besides?
I would say that we are probably one of the largest communities that don't have some full-time staff. So if I always look at Topsom because they're right next door to us. Even though they have a larger commercial setting, their population, their permanent population is just under us. I mean, the last census they're at 8,900, and they have full-time chief, full-time deputy chief, administrative assistant, 4 full-time firefighters, at least. If that's not going up, I think there might be 6 now. Full-time staff, and they're staffing 24 hours a day, and they're staffing. Of course, they're also running an ambulance. So we're one of the larger communities that's not running an ambulance. That kind of differs it when it's hard. It's easy to offset full-time staff if you have your own in-house ambulance, but you're seeing that a lot of the communities our size are going to at least a couple people during the daytime of full-time staffing. Even some smaller communities than us are doing it because of lack of availability of staffing.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. We can take a short break, and then we'll get into the police department. If anybody needs to use that restroom.
Need to get up and loosen up. a little
Loosen
bit
up,
for-
stretch.
for the big police one.
Good job.
Yeah, and if anybody wants any waters, I have some right here I can pass to you. Yep, no problem.
everybody had to do that a lot.
It's good to get comments, so we can work on it.
That's, I mean, I don't
Appreciate
mind the
Remember,
text.
we used to do it?
Good.
Comparative year to year is very
And
helpful.
actually, now, if everybody's all set,
I got an open door.
Lights are on.
lights are on, we're actually gonna go with the police budget, and, here we go.
All right. Everybody knows me. I'm Ryan McGee, but for the public that's listening, I'm going to present the Police Department Communications and ACO budget tonight, and I decided that I would do it through PowerPoint because I have a lot to say. I'm very proud of our department. We have a very professional department, and they really care about this community, and I think we've come a long ways. So with that being said, I'm going to move ahead. So I'm going to dedicate this budget report to our K-9 Moxie. Lisbon Police Department K-9 Moxie's end of watch was on Friday, March 12, 2021. Moxie suffered a medical illness that came upon him suddenly and without warning. Moxie graduated from K-9 school as a certified patrol and narcotics detection dog. K-9 Moxie proudly served the citizens of Lisbon from 2015 to 2021, always faithfully by Sergeant St. Pierre's side. His service was noteworthy. Moxie was an asset to the Lisbon Police Department and the Lisbon community and was always ready to assist Lisbon and surrounding agencies when called upon. Sergeant St. Pierre was Lisbon Police Department's K-9 handler, working with the department's K-9s, K-9 Dex, and K-9 Moxie for 16 years total. Sergeant St. Pierre's loyalty, hard work, and dedication to the K-9 program made it excel in all aspects, and it's greatly appreciated by the department and the Lisbon community. Countless times throughout his career, over and over, Sergeant St. Pierre and his four-legged partners recovered drugs, found lost persons, tracked down dangerous suspects, and protected his fellow officers with his loyal canines. Thank you, Sergeant St. Pierre, for your dedication to the community, the department as a canine handler, and the department looks forward to your assistance to bring on a new canine handler in the years to come. So now to go over an overview of just this past year quickly. COVID-19 throughout the past year and looking ahead in the future. Some of you might recognize that vehicle. Kurt, you might recognize that.
Not that old.
It's Richard Coda and Chief Bud Junkins. It's a 1957 patrol car for those of you that weren't around then. But we're going to be talking about the future. So in 2021, we were hoping the COVID-19 pandemic would be behind us. Unfortunately, that was not the case. As we all continue to adjust to the challenges it brought, this past year we were not able to have the Moxie Festival parade like we all hoped for. However, the community came together and we were able to do a lot of great events and programs this past year. Looking ahead to this coming year, the Lisbon Police Department is very excited to have the Memorial Day Parade, the Moxie Festival, as well as the Blues Festival coming back to Lisbon. Events like these bring our community members together and celebrate the wonderful community we have here in Lisbon. I want to talk briefly about some of the programs that we've enacted over the past year at the Police Department. The Lisbon Police Department started a few new programs, partnered with Tri-County Mental Health Drug Abuse Counselors to provide more resources to Lisbon residents. The new Options program will provide help to citizens that may be struggling with drug addiction. This is beneficial, very beneficial program that is funded through the Tri-County Mental Health Program and is at absolutely no cost to Lisbon residents. Over the past year, our officers have utilized this new program on several occasions. The program has gone so well that Tri-County Mental Health is looking at adding more of these counselors to our area to work with our officers. This is very beneficial to our community and will help people get the services they need to better themselves, and again, at no cost to our police department. Something else we've worked on in the police department over the past year is senior citizen fraud and identity theft awareness. Scams and fraud have continued to be an issue with the elderly who are targeted regularly. This department has taken proactive measures to combat this in our community and is excited to be offering senior citizen fraud and identity theft awareness training. With a growing number of scams aimed towards our elderly, we want to do everything we can to help educate our community. Community members are being provided the latest and greatest tools and handouts to avoid becoming a victim. These trainings are being hosted by Criminal Investigation Division at the PD. The department will be hosting more trainings in 2022 at the MTM Center on School Street in Lisbon Falls, and the trainings will be posted on our Facebook page. For those of you that don't have Facebook, we'll also be posting it at the library and the town office and post offices so other people are aware of it as well. Another new program that we started this past year is called Handle with Care. This new program helps students in our school systems. If an officer responds on the weekend or the evening or the overnight hours and handles a traumatic event involving a child, and that child has to go to school the next day, the information, Handle with Care, will be shared with our SRO. The school resource officer will speak with the trauma and resiliency coaches and guidance counselors, letting them know handle little Johnny with care today. They do not know any details of what went on. However, the school will be better prepared to handle a student that may be having a hard time throughout the school day and can handle the child with care and offer assistance if needed. This is a way of being proactive, so the school knows there could be a reason why little Johnny is acting out or having a bad day. And this can allow them to handle the situation more delicately and help the child. One of the other big things that we've been working on in the police department is ALICE training. Some of you might ask, what's ALICE training? Well, ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, and Counter. ALICE training, what do we know about it in the last 2 decades of school active shooter incidents? Well, this is what we know. There was a total of 44 incidents across our country, 241 victims, 200 of those wounded, 126 students, 74 staff members wounded, 41 lost their lives. Complete lockdown-style approaches had the most victims. The average timeline of the incidents is 2 to 5 minutes long, and out of these attacks, 84% of assailants had their attacks disrupted or ended before external law enforcement arrived on scene. 22 assailants were stopped by students, staff, on-site law enforcement, or citizens. Victim intervention is the greatest influencer in ending these events quickly. As such, this is why we strongly advocate against lockdown-only approach, and we encourage multi-option response, such as ALICE. The purpose of this ALICE training is to empower you to teach you tools that we hope you'll never have to use. The Lisbon Police Department has given 45-minute presentations to every one of our schools in town this past fall on an overview of the ALICE program. Since that time, our Lisbon Police Department ALICE instructors have given 2-hour blocks of instruction in almost all of our schools to Lisbon school employees, with the goal of it being completed by the end of the school year. We have also given this training to some of our town office departments to provide better safety to our staff, and will continue to provide this to Lisbon staff into the upcoming year. Something else that I want to touch on was this past year we had the 9/11 ceremony. The ceremony marked the passage of 2 decades since the day that changed our lives forever. We honored the 3,500 lives that were lost in the 2001 attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and aboard Flight 93, and also honored the servicemen and women, police officers, firefighters, and all those first responders lost, and those who continue to protect and serve this great country. There was a great turnout for the community, and we will continue to honor those men and women by never forgetting. Now to get into the budget for this evening. I'm going to start with an overview with the lieutenant's position being filled and several other positions being filled at the end of 2021. We are at 14 full-time officers in Lisbon, and we are in the process of filling our 15th position that is vacant. Applications closed this past Friday. It is important to remember a few years back that one of our 2 school resource officer positions was cut by the school department. The school department now has 4 schools in town which are patrolled by 1 school resource officer, when it used to only be 3 schools patrolled by 2 school resource officers. The police department encourages the town and the school department to replace this position. It is a goal of the police department to work with the school department to put the 2nd school resource officer back into our school systems. The police department will actively be searching for school resource officer grants in 2022 to restore this position, and will come back to the town council at a later date after the grants open later this year. The school resource officer position is not only an asset to the protection of our schools, it is also vital in building strong bonds between the community's youth and our police officers. Now, an important topic that also is worth mentioning this evening is the Maine Police Employment Data. It keeps data on police officers in the state of Maine. The most recent information from the Maine Police Employment Data is from December 9th of 2020. This information takes the crime rate in Maine for offenses per 1,000 residents. There were 1,639 full-time municipal law enforcement officers, representing 1.93 officers per 1,000 population for urban population areas. Now, these numbers are very important because they're based on the crime rate here in Maine. Taking those above numbers into account, in 2010, Lisbon had a population of just over 9,000 residents. Moving forward 10 years to the 2020 U.S. Census, Lisbon now has a population of 9,711. According to the state analysis, we should have 1.93 full-time officers per 1,000 residents, with a population of 9,711 residents. To summarize, based on the Maine Police Employment Data, and our population, we should be at 18 full-time officers to make our department fully staffed, which is a goal that we'll be working towards in the years to come, but not this year. Currently, Lisbon's staffed with 14 full-time officers and soon to be 15 full-time officers that was budgeted in the past budget. We currently have 3 part-time reserve police officers, and we're working towards being at 6 reserve police officers by the end of fiscal year 23. At one time, Lisbon was a 16 full-time police officer department with 8 reserves. Mr. Lunt would remember that because that was back when he was the town manager of this town. According to the 2020 U.S. Census, Lisbon's the 23rd largest community in the Maine. I'll say that again. 2020 Census, Lisbon was the 23rd largest community in Maine, with nearly 500 municipalities in our state, and being the 23rd largest does not make us a small town anymore. We are next door to some of the highest crime areas in the state, and our proximity to other urban areas, along with improved roads giving access to and from, brings criminal activity to our community. Our Lisbon police officers, communication officers, animal control officer, they do an outstanding job keeping our community safe, and I applaud them for their dedication to our community. I've included some statistics that show what occurred during 2021 and what the department experienced for calls for service. The police department in 2019 handled a total of 12,070 calls for service. In 2020, the police department handled a total of 14,628 calls for service, which was a drastic increase of 21% during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, we had a total of 12,807 calls for service, which was a 12% decrease in calls for service from the previous year. Now, keeping in mind, with a decrease in calls for service, the police department had an officer deployed with the U.S. military, 2 vacant police officer positions and 1 officer in training, and 1 officer out in injury for several months, leaving us with only 9 police officers to cover the calls. These calls for service included the following investigations, which is important to know what we handled in 2021. We handled the following serious offenses: attempted murder, elevated aggravated assault, domestic violence assault, aggravated assault, unlawful sexual touching, gross sexual assault, terrorizing, theft, unauthorized taking, theft by deception, criminal mischief, criminal trespass, driving under the influence, disorderly conduct, violation of conditional release, harassment, violation of protection orders, leaving the scene of motor vehicle accidents, burglaries, driving to endanger, forgery, unlawful possession of scheduled drugs, sale and use of drugs, illegal possession of firearms, furnishing alcohol to minors, and protective custodies. Now, in 2021, the department had a 6% decrease in the number of mental health calls and attempted and threatened suicide calls, compared to the previous year, which was an 85% increase we saw that previous year during the COVID pandemic. The members of the police department did an outstanding job providing empathy and compassion to these in need, finding the resources and getting the community members help. The police department has worked on increasing resources in our community to help with mental health and opioid addiction, and these efforts are showing and paying off. Moving ahead, recruitment and retention in the fiscal year 23 increase over the fiscal year 22, and I'll start to get into that a little bit here. It's important to invest in our police and communication officers for retention and to keep them interested in being committed to a career in the town of Lisbon. Other departments are offering sign-on bonuses up to $20,000, greater pay than the town of Lisbon, and we are looking at ways to improve retention efforts within the department. It continues to be a part of the problem in Maine, where there is an overwhelming amount of retirements and officers are leaving law enforcement not wanting to get into this career. This is creating a large backlog of new hires waiting to go to the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. The waiting period for a newly hired police officer to get into the Maine Criminal Justice Academy is 1 to 1.5 years after they're hired. This is very concerning, since we are short positions right now and we will have several retirements in the next 2 to 4 years alone. Creating strong retention of our officers in 2022, along with proactive recruitment and market value pay, will retain the great members of this department. The market study analysis conducted by CMA recently put the pay for the Lisbon Police Department at the fair market value for the department. As you can see, the increase under the police department's budget of department head, administrative, and non-supervisory lines in front of you in your packets, that reflects those pay raises in the budget binders. This creates an increase in overtime wages, replacement wages, retirement, health insurance, and FICA. Another increase was on the temporary seasonal line that was increased from $18,000 to $34,994, since we're getting back to full reserve officer staff. Currently, we have 4 shifts a week that we staff with reserve police officers. However, we were previously budgeting half that amount, so only 2 shifts a week, since we had lost reserve police officers. Most of our reserve police officers were full-time at other departments, and due to COVID and staffing shortages, were not able to work Lisbon reserve shifts, and some of them ended up getting done. This coming fiscal year, we'll be increasing our reserve officer staff to assist in supplementing our coverages. We hired 1 reserve officer this past fall, and we're in the process of hiring another reserve police officer. Having reserve police officers on duty during these busy times is instrumental in providing the best possible service to the residents of Lisbon. We also need those reserve police officers during large events that occur, such as the Memorial Day parades, the Moxie Festival, and this year we're also going to have the Blues Festival, which will bring thousands of people to our community. Professional development was also increased for the new officers that will need to go away to the Maine Criminal Justice Academy. That's a $3,000 increase, which is what the academy charges for that now. It wasn't that many years ago where the Maine Criminal Justice Academy didn't even charge us for them to go to the academy. Total increase to the police department budget is $253,000. This calculates a total of 13%. 90% of this budget is police personnel. And if you look at these wage lines that I presented to you as well, this is all due from the pay study. All of it from my personnel anyway reflects what the pay study that was done at market value. And I can say from my own study that I did before we even got the market study value back was that we were severely underpaid from all the departments around us, on an average of $5 to $6 an hour.
What would this make the starting pay for a patrolman?
Starting pay for a patrolman would be, they're in front of 25?
Currently 20. What is it currently?
19.
$19.
$19.
Yeah. The 19 doesn't attract a lot of people.
Doesn't attract people. But it's also not what a police officer should be making in this day and age.
They don't all do it for the money.
With what a lot of people went through with defund the police in other states, it just there's a lot of interest that we just have not seen.
It's just a smaller pool, period.
But what I can say is that the people that we're attracting them because of the reputation this community has. And it's not just the police department, it's the town government as well. People that are sitting in this room as well.
And you haven't resorted to using these bonuses, signing bonuses? You haven't done that?
The reason why I haven't done that is because I don't want someone thinking I want to go just to Lisbon PD because they're going to give me a $20,000 sign-on. What I'd rather do is pay them fair market value, what they should be paid, and have people come here due to the reputation and wanting to stay here long-term, as I've done, as Councilor Moore's done, because, our blood, sweat, and tears become part of this.
They don't decide based on, say, Thompson gives $3,000 stipend and you don't, and they're the same pay.
Correct.
They go there.
Correct.
Money does motivate
And that's
people.
happened. We've lost officers in the past few years. They've gone to other
get people
departments.
already trained. That's one way you can get people already trained.
Yep, that's correct too. So moving ahead, I'm just going to talk about some of the other things that we're doing here and continue to improve and increase community outreach within the Lisbon community, which I think is very important also for retention, but retention of our officers. But on top of retention, it's also important in that we're doing everything we can with the community. So officers at all levels of the department are becoming more involved with our community policing. This includes Special Olympics of Maine, the DARE program and trips, as well as reestablishing the Citizens Police Academy. Once fully staffed, if COVID restrictions allow next winter, we will be bringing that back. We are also looking into starting new outdoor programs that can connect police officers with our youth in the community, to include mountain biking programs and fishing programs utilizing our own Beaver Park. Finally, being at full staff will allow our department to be proactive department instead of being reactive. Another part of this, and I've heard it several times from the council, is training, and something that the department's always been keen on is training our officers to reduce liability. The department will increase training for Lisbon officers to become instructors within our department. There are various trainings which includes mechanics of arrest, restraint, and control, MARC, and also firearms instructor, less lethal force instructor, and intoxicants instructor. It is proven that with training, we can reduce liability to the town and the officers by having Maine Criminal Justice certified instructors within our department. This will assist us in reducing liability and provide greater training to our department. This was a goal in 2021 that we were working towards. However, due to COVID and short staffing, a lot of those trainings were not available and they were canceled. In 2022 into 2023, we were sending officers to MARC instructor training as well as firearms instructor trainings and also MOI. Leadership is found at all levels within my department. As officers become ready, they are sent to methods of instruction or MOI training. MOI is a 2-week-long training which teaches our officers how to become instructors and effective leaders within our department. It also gives them the tools to become field training officers. Field training officers are responsible for training our newly hired officers. Sending officers across all levels of the agency to leadership trainings enhances the level of the service we provide to our community and also prepares officers for supervisor positions in the future. This was a goal of our council, as I stated, and as you can see here from what I explained, we were implementing in our training to our staff. I wanted to talk to you about body-worn camera implementation. Body-worn cameras increase transparency between the community and the department, defend officers against false accusations, increases agency accountability, and improves officer training. Officers already audio record all of their interactions with the public using a WatchGuard in-cruiser camera system and a body-worn microphone. Having the body-worn video footage will allow for this to be added as further documentation of the incident. Grant funding will be sought out in fiscal year 23 to obtain body-worn cameras for the department. I'm bringing this up to you now because body-worn cameras are very expensive. They can cost upwards of $250,000. The picture that you see on the screen in front of me is a $250,000 unit setup for our whole department. That little circle in the middle of their chest, it's actually called body-worn. It's a camera that every officer in our department would wear, including our detectives, and it's highly advanced from GPS tracking to if the officer was laying on their back, to if they pulled their gun out of their holster. It is the most advanced camera system that you can get. But it's also could potentially cost up to $250,000. On the picture on the left is a WatchGuard Vista camera, which is substantially less than that. It would actually integrate with our WatchGuard cameras. They're actually in the process of upgrading those cameras, and I've been looking into that as well. I'm bringing all this to you because I am actively looking for grants. I've attended an online seminar recently about body-worn cameras, and it is a goal of mine, and that's why I'm bringing it up as well, a goal of my department, to implement body-worn cameras before the end of fiscal year 23. And I will be seeking out grant money to fund this project, and it will be a substantial amount. This is also something that I'm going to utilize our Public Safety Committee on as well, because there's a lot of policies and other procedures that we'll implement with it. But I do want to bring it to you tonight because it is a substantial amount. However, as I said, I'm going to fund it through grant funding, but I also want to add that to my CIP once we get it, so in the future we can be spacing it out and we don't get hit with a huge amount that we have to replace in 1 year. But those for talks down the road. But
You have to negotiate that with the union, the use of body
nope.
cameras?
No.
So there's,
We already have audio recording devices and we already have standard operating procedures on it.
there's no issues there.
There's no issues. And actually my whole department, everybody welcomes it.
So is this for patrolmen, not for detectives or whatever?
I'm even going to wear one. We're all going to wear one. Transparency is across the board. And I wear my uniform when I'm not the interim town manager. I wear my uniform every day. So I've also explained to them that I'll be wearing one as well.
You're a working chief, we understand.
I am a working chief. But and they actually make it's a smaller setup for the detectives as well. But I mean, at first when body-worn cameras first came out a few years back, 4 years ago or so, when they first started to come up, there was a lot of different unions, a lot of different people that got involved. But now that's changed. They've found that that body-worn cameras are protecting the officers, and the officers are doing the right thing in the majority of the cases. And I have a highly professional department, and I think it's going to be a very good thing for the town. Moving ahead, I'm going to get into the communications budget. Lisbon Communication Center is staffed with our four full-time communications officers. This past year, we had 2 communication officers leave, and now we have 2 new full-time communication officers. The department had struggled to fill one of the positions that was vacant for several months. We have also had 3 reserve communication officers retire, and it has been difficult filling those positions as well. We have hired 2 new reserve communication officers, and we're going to be hiring 1 more before summertime, we hope. The total increase in the communication budget for fiscal year 23 is $18,377. This is an increase in wages, replacement wages, retirement, health insurance. What I found was when we have a communications officer that leaves, it leaves obviously a void, and we've overexpended that line item. We're also have an employee that's going to be out for some time as well on maternity leave, so I'm preparing for that as well, and that's some of those costs there. I'd like to talk about the animal control budget. The Animal Control Department with Humane Officer Jeffrey Cooper and part-time Animal Control Officer Ray Schlotterbeck remained busy throughout the year. Lisbon Animal Control not only services our community, but also the towns of Sabattis, Bowdoin, and Durham. In the calendar year 2021, the Animal Control officers recorded 526 calls for service in Lisbon, and that's the graph in the center of the in blue. 170 of those were in Sabattis, 92 in Bowdoin, and 69 in Durham, totaling 857 calls for service. This is a 22% increase in calls for service. The fiscal year 23 budget increases are reflected directly from the CMA wage study to bring them to market value, which in turn also increased the Maine State Retirement and FICA. This budget also reflects an increase in the operating supplies from $425 to $1,000 due to increase in supplies needed for sanitation and cleaning. There was also an increase in the animal shelter services due to the population increase in Lisbon, so this in turn caused a $1,017 increase. So the total increase in the animal control budget for fiscal year 23 is $14,462. However, also important to talk about is the revenue. The total revenue for the town that we collect from the towns of Bowdoin, Sabattis, and Durham for ACO services is $42,575. That's working very well. Yep. Yeah, and they've been very happy with that as well. Our department is made up of some caring, courageous professionals that are committed to treating all with dignity and compassion and respect in this community. Our staff enjoys strong support from the Lisbon community, the town management, and the town council. It is through the public's trust and the support that the police department can provide a safe environment for our community to thrive. I'm very proud of these women and men in the Lisbon Police Department, and I feel fortunate to serve the community alongside them as we work in partnership with the community members to keep the town of Lisbon safe. I'd like to thank you for your time this evening, and at this time we can go over the budget individually or we can ask questions. But I would say the majority of the budget numbers are going to be based off the CMA market analysis that I've explained.
Just start, see if council has any questions.
Okay.
We kind of went over some of the numbers as you went through there. Is there any particular questions of the presentation that's been put or the numbers that actually were in our packets for discussion or
One thing I didn't touch on actually, and as I'm looking at my notes, was gas. Obviously, we're increasing the gas line of $4,429, but that's going to be subject to change, obviously. But I do feel pretty comfortable with that for where we're at right now, anyways, with gas.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yes, sir.
Just a odd question to you, Chief McGee. I noticed the court time line.
Yes.
Do you feel that that's maybe not high enough? Like, I have a question about court where, with the pandemic, obviously there was less, and so is last year's budget. I noticed less.
We did reduce it.
That will go up now that possibly things seem to be changing the other way?
Yes and no, and I'll tell you the reason why I say both. Court has somewhat came back. However, we are still doing all our Bureau of Motor Vehicle court hearings by Zoom, and we've actually had some civil trials by Zoom. So I think they like the idea of having Zoom. So we're still in that phase of we don't know exactly where we're going to be at with court. I was actually looking at originally to reducing it, but then I felt we're just coming out of the pandemic. I mean, we're going to start removing some stuff here at the town office in the coming weeks. I figured it was safer to leave it.
For that reason, so that's why I was curious.
Yep, good question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? questions of the presentation or the line items that were presented in our packets, or, because I think you actually hit on everything that actually went up drastically, and the biggest thing was the fuel line. Most of it actually stayed pretty stagnant to the previous year.
Correct.
From police, we can't let them off that easy. One of the questions I have for finances is the interim town manager has actually presented many times that he actually didn't change his salary based on the study that was done, and
Not to the figures that they said. It's
No.
changed, but I wasn't going to figure. I didn't change it to the amounts that they said for market value, because I realized this isn't an easy budget to present tonight. I mean, I realize these are increases, but it's what we need to do for our department in order to retain good officers. So I did not bring myself up to the percentages that they're at, because I'd rather see that go towards the department.
with that being said, I mean, we appreciate everything you're doing, but if we would have had to replace you tomorrow, I mean, it would actually only be, we'd have to be in those right numbers to actually make that work. So, I mean, how much of this budget, I mean, I know I had asked previously to have it prepared, but how much would this budget actually change if we were to bring all the numbers up to the adequate level of what the salary study presented for that same level?
Yep. So just looking at the chief of police position, right now in the budget packet, it's $92,560, which breaks down to $44.50 an hour. So based on what CMA had presented, they're looking at a market study, and that looks at that midpoint formula. So the way that we approached it with Charles from CMA is years of service, other attributes that contribute to that to get to that midpoint level. We did a pay scale based on a step, and that step goes up to 20 years. Now that means that a midpoint would be about 10 years, or that 8th step, because we did an 8, 12, 16, 20 step. So that 8th step is inclusive of that 10-year mark. So given that, and given the steps for the years of service, the chief of police, the department head line, could actually increase from $92,000 to $95,285 to up to $101,129. And that is a difference in how Charles explained it, is the way that you either be aggressive on the onset of this pay scale to get to that midpoint, or from that midpoint to get to that 20-year max. So that's why I gave that $95,284 to the $101,129. Based on what he presented at the step for the current position, the suggestion would be $95,285.
So actually, that's even the lower of the steps, in a sense. I mean, it would be my recommendation that I would actually listen to council's recommendations and the finance. I mean, we've brought everybody in this department into the town employees as a whole up to that base level step. I would hate to see him shortchange himself only because he's the one that's actually doing the work on it. So again, I mean, I would actually like to see it brought up to that 95 figure, and again, that's still on the low side of it, just to be adequate to.
That's
And
not
again,
him to be recruiting for somebody, right?
absolutely, you know. So.
Hopefully, you're not looking to get rid of it, because
No,
I would work my
no,
tail off.
Paying to keep you.
Yeah, we're going to keep you, but it's one of those things where, you know, eventually we actually, if we don't have it in line now, that means we have to probably catch up later on if something was to happen.
Yeah,
Because
no,
this is a program that's not just for this year, but upcoming years. And if we, as he mentioned the other day, if we start behind, we're always going to be behind. So we want to make sure that we actually keep at that same level. So, I mean, we can't vote tonight, but I mean, is a nod of heads or just a straw poll? I mean, is it a fair assumption that we actually start this at where it should be?
At least. I go to 100.
I go to 100. You got my vote
I
for
wouldn't
100.
get out of bed for less than 100.
I'm with you.
But you don't really have a scale yet, it sounds like. You're devising one as we go. You've got the study, and it talks about a midpoint, but it hasn't laid out a scale in there. You're trying to devise one, it sounds like.
scale
He
it,
had,
maybe.
yep, he had presented it at the last meeting
So-
that there was a scale in place.
But it depends how you look at it, where you plot somebody, is that what I'm hearing?
Well, if you have someone
Years of
that's
service.
going,
Years of service.
right, so if someone were to apply for a position
Right.
today, you would look at their resume like you would in any job interview and look at their years of service. Now, the scale goes from entry to 20 years. So if someone comes in with 10 years of experience in municipal background, if we're going to use police as an example, they've been a police officer for 10 years, then that evaluation of where they would fall on the scale would come into play. Would they fall in that 8th step because they have 10 years of previous experience and that would be that rate of pay? Or would they fall maybe on that 4 step, depending on budgetary and all of that? I think realistically, if they're coming in with 10 years, you're going to look at that 8th step, and it's just a way to
You're not going to
Put them
chief
in
for quite a few years.
but to put those buckets in place so that way when
Not too worried about it, to be honest. To be
This is a
straightforward.
recommendation by was this CMA?
CMA did the pay study.
That was CMA that's recommending the 95 something?
That was actually the start, the lower of that,
Yeah.
that range. It was not, I mean, the 92 is not appropriately accounted for even the base step. So, if you went to the 8th step, that would actually be more higher than that level. So we're still shortchanging them.
You couldn't have been the only position who had this flexibility with it, was it?
So,
No, I purposely didn't want my step to be at the market level.
Right.
And actually, we're still in union negotiations, and I don't have a problem keeping it on the lower side, quite frankly.
And he's been the only one saying, no, I don't need no more money.
Everyone
And
else
he's
said,
the only one that
yeah,
really
everyone else
deserves
said we need to get baseline minimum, we need to
Yeah.
get above to attract people.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't go lower than anything, I wouldn't even go baseline.
Nope.
Why would we do that?
It's starting at baseline.
Yeah.
Especially for the work that Ryan's been putting in on all aspects of every department, not even just town manager and chief of police, but everything,
I'm at
in my
100.
opinion.
Gee, sounds like he's more at the 95 or the 92, but I mean,
Nice.
I didn't bring him in to argue this point, so that's why I
fine.
wanted to bring it up.
It's just, I didn't take this lightly. That's the biggest point I can get across. I don't
Yeah.
take this lightly of this budget. I have family that lives in town and obviously care about everything. And Kayla and I worked very hard at trying to get this budget put together so it's fair for the town. So,
It seems you do very well by all the officers and everybody else in your department too, so
Thanks.
I really appreciate everything you're doing
Yes.
for them and
Yep.
their families.
Townwide, I mean,
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
just the
townwide.
department, so. I mean, I would want to at least make the recommendation, we go to the 95 figure that was the base.
Yeah, I
step,
mean,
but-
I don't know if it's appropriate to negotiate
Yeah,
contracts
Kind of
in a
uncomfortable.
workshop. I
Yeah.
think we're kind of,
but we are actually, I mean,
but I get the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
point's well taken that
yeah,
Ryan's trying to.
yeah, he's actually trying to be somewhat,
Sacrificing himself.
yeah, exactly. But, I mean, I guess
It's a
the point.
position
I'm
was-
not sacrificing. I mean,
Yeah.
I am doing fine. You know.
Yeah.
It's the position you have to worry about, though.
Yeah. No, and I respect
and
that as
not
well.
even-
And I definitely
The
respect that.
Yeah.
town is traditionally underpaid, everybody, including the town manager.
Yeah.
To me, I'm not looking at an individual.
You can come back.
To me, I'm not looking at the individual person, whether it's him sitting there or not, or what he's doing. It's if we're actually making the assumption that we're actually going to try to bring everybody to the proper level as a starting point, I just think we need to do that across the board. So whether it's what you were talking about somebody else, we need to actually not pick and choose who we do, who we don't. If we're going to do it townwide, we actually have to be at that same level. I guess that's my biggest
I
argument,
understand that.
regardless.
But I feel like we're getting into
Yeah.
negotiations here. and I think this is
Yeah,
appropriate.
no, I totally agree with that. I just wanted to be brought forward that that was the only position that, so to speak, wasn't brought to that level, which I think we need to take that in consideration, that's all.
We also have to hire a town manager. I believe the one that just left was at
102,
102.
And the new market
So I
study
don't know
brings
what
it
the
to
new
111
market.
111.
brings the new town manager in.
We gotta consider that also.
Absolutely. Well, again, I just want to make sure,
Never
make
met
a point,
anybody
so.
that was overpaid, have you? Never. Never.
I read about people that overpaid, but I don't know
I
any.
never thought they were overpaid.
exactly.
Everyone
All
thinks
right.
everybody else is overpaid.
With that being said, I guess there's any more questions on the police, or the communication, or the
ACO?
The ACO, yep. I think they're all working well for us, so I mean, I think the budget's pretty well presented. With that being said, if everybody's all set and there's no other questions, again, this upcoming budget's the next one that we see. If there's any, big questions ahead of time, please email them in so they can try to get some answers on stuff that'd be more critical.
What are we doing next time? What's the next one? Not till
So April 5th is a regular council
April
meeting,
12th,
Yeah.
is
so
it?
it would be the following Tuesday. And I believe,
Public Works, where?
Right here.
Must be Public Works.
no,
April 5th is.
April 5th is going to be
Regular council meeting.
regular meeting. April
Regular meeting.
12th is Public Works, Transfer Station, Streets, Hydrant Rental, and the Sewer Wastewater Treatment Plant.
Public Works.
You can bet on that night if you want to.
Plumbing, no, plumbing, yes.
And the 14th will be the planning board meeting with the CIP review, just for everybody can hear the listeners.
Perfect. If there's no other questions or answers, I'll put an end to the workshop this evening, and Squire, you made it to another meeting, huh?
Your last one.
The last one.
I think you could,
Thank you for letting me
you should come in like every once in a while, just to sit,
Come visit us.
come and visit.
feel like this is a visit.
She's already checked out,
She's
right?
done with the visit.
I think I owe you one.
I visited.